My name is Laureline Hoyt. I'm the Executive Director of the Taiwan Network of Engaged Universities. Welcome to the 7th episode in the series, Adapting to the New Reality, Civically Engaged Universities in Partnership with Indigenous Communities. This webinar series is part of the educational partnership between the Open Society University Network and the Taiwan Network. And both networks share a global vision of uniting universities around the world in collaborative research and learning projects, and also preparing students to become engaged citizens. The webinar itself is part of a project called Communities of Virtual Alliance and Interdependence, or COVAID. And the idea is that COVAID is a positive response to the COVID pandemic. We're aiming to collect and share stories of institutions and individuals who are taking action to mitigate the crisis. We're trying to document practical steps and strategies that may be of use elsewhere. And importantly, we are working to strengthen public support for civically engaged universities around the world. COVAID consists of 2 major parts: a year-long webinar series, as well as a student engagement award for undergraduate students and a mini grant for graduate students. The undergraduate student awards have been issued, and we are currently accepting applications for the mini grants for graduate students. So if you know any graduate students who would like to apply, please ask them to do so. I will be handing this session off to our moderator. So without further ado, Maura, would you please take the stage, so to speak?
Okay, haku mepchumawish, Castro hill nahit, kleken shishilop, kiti papuil hi kuku. My name is Maui Sullivan, broadcasting from Shishilop, what is now Ventura, California. And I'm from the coastal band of the Chumash Nation. So we're a tribe over here in California, one of many, many tribes. So I'm excited to be able to share that out with the world today and let people know that, you know, we still live here. So I'm really excited. We have a really great group of people here today. And we're actually going to go and hear from everyone right now, and really kind of, you know, overarching the work I do with my community. We're working on our language right now. So I'm in a university, I'm in a PhD program, learning about linguistics, and then doing this kind of stuff, connecting with other people. So I'm excited to hear from everyone else, because I feel like that's really at the core of a lot of the work we do is community work. And so how does that look different for everybody? So I think right now I'll hand it over to Sue and Ray so they can share a little bit about their community.
Yudumurang, Yundu, Yirai, Marangalang, Yundu, Wadri, Pujan, Wadri, Gibi. So, good day, g'day. My name's Ray Woods. My Wiradjuri name, Bujan, and Wiradjuri man from Wiradjuri Nation in Australia, in New South Wales of Australia. I'm here representing CSU as a representative of CSU in New South Wales. CSU actually has 4 campuses on our nation, on the Wiradjuri Nation. So it was set up for us to. Our elders were the ones who really organised getting a course at CSU for Wiradjuri language, culture, and heritage. Our language, for those from overseas don't know, our language was taken away from us with European settlement here in Australia, with the threats to our elders back in the days of having their children taken away from them they spoke the language. So the language sort of was sort of spoken in quietness amongst some of the family members. So as a child growing up, I got a few words of our language, but there was no fluent speakers around my family or anything like that. So it was one of my goals to sort of learn our language. Now, with our language comes, our identity and who we are. So it was vital for us to get back our language and revitalise our language. So our elders played a big part in that. Our Wiradjuri Council of Elders, they helped one of the elders who had learnt the language through his grandfather, Uncle Stan Grant. He was then supported by another fellow that went around our nation and gathered the language and then put it into a dictionary. So the hardest thing for us is our language is, like most, is orally taught from us as kids. That was why it was never a written language. So it was so it's always been a little bit difficult then to learn unless you're face-to-face sort of value. So in a way, that's one of the things that COVID sort of has done with our course. It's sort of made it a bit more difficult to having those face-to-face contact with people, and that's been a bit of an issue because of our elders, the safety of our elders and stuff too. Our course is run through distance ed, and we have residentials. I think it's about 3 or 4 days of residentials. Sue will correct me on that later, but I know it was 3 or 4 when I went through. I was went through the course, one of the first to go through the course. The course has grown remarkably since, I think it was 18 or 21 or something in our course, and I think it grows every year. So it's taken a hold, and the difficult part I think we found is with those residentials, they're so important for our people to get together and to share, and because a lot of that language is about our culture and learning our culture, and it's also part of the course is our nation building too, is rebuilding our nation. So it's so important for us and we are social sort of people too. We like to get together and share our information. So I don't know if I'm going too far, but I might have to pass it on to Sue and let her have a bit of a say and fill in the blanks.
Thank you, Ray.
Thanks, Uncle Ray. Yurudu Marang. Sorry, I've just lost myself. Yurudu Marang. Yuwandu, Jugan Gabaga Gabaga, Wiradjuri Galari Yinya. I said, good day, my name is Sue Green. I'm a Galari, which is my clan group, Wiradjuri, my nation group, woman. I'm currently the Professor of Indigenous Australian Studies at the University of Charles Sturt and based at Wagga Wagga. I'm also the course director for the Wiradjuri Language, Culture and Heritage course that Uncle Ray was just telling you a bit about. I'll start off with telling you a little bit about the structure of the course, which is 4 subjects over 2 years. It's a graduate program, but it's unique in that you don't need to have another degree to come into it. The course is a partnership between the Wiradjuri elders and the university. The content of the course is owned by the community, and the university supports us in running the program. Many of our elders come into the course without having any formal education. And they come out the other end with very strong skills. We also have people who have got degrees and PhDs coming into the course, and they comment that this is the hardest course they've ever done at university. So it's not a Mickey Mouse course or a course that's dumbed down in any way, shape or form. It meets all of the standards that the government and the university requires of a course at university, but it also meets the standards of our community, and that's what makes this course so special. We have 4 subjects running over the 2 years. The first course is Wiradjuri language. Second is the culture and heritage subject. Then we have a nation building subject that Uncle Ray mentioned before. And the final subject is a community project proposal that students need to put together, and then they go before a panel of elders, and it's the elders who decide whether the students pass through the course after that final project or not. So myself, I found my way into the course. I was someone who was taken from my family, so what here in Australia we call the stolen generations, as was my father before me. And we were dislocated from country, and I grew up with minimal education and came into being educated in my mid-20s as a single mother. By my 49th year, I was finishing my PhD, and I asked the ancestors, how do we decolonise, or how do I decolonise? And as generally happens when you ask your ancestors something, they will answer you. And sometimes you might not like the answer. And in my case, I wasn't particularly keen. I had promised everyone around me, including myself, that I would not study any further. And turning 50 shortly afterwards, and also having a hearing impairment, the last thing I thought that I was capable of doing was learning another language, even though it was my language. So I'd never actually heard my language spoken until I arrived at CSU. I came in the second intake, so as Uncle Ray was finishing, and I did the course. When I finished, I got my daughter to do the course. One of my sons have done the course, and for all of us, it was life-changing. And the result of that has been is that myself, my children and my grandchildren have all moved back home, moved back to our country, Wiradjuri country. The course is a really important course, not just for getting people into university or, you know, for learning language, because in learning language we learn our culture, but it's also reunited many of us with our families. We have had extensive removal, well, it really hasn't stopped here in Australia. Our children are still being taken, even though it's not official government policy. So for many people coming into this course, they are meeting very, very close cousins, first cousins, and relatives, and sometimes they didn't even know these people existed. So for us, while the course is a distance course, we have found that it doesn't really work well online. Besides the fact that people not having necessarily access to technology for those in rural and regional areas, but it is that thing of coming together and being together and learning together. So for us, COVID, whilst as a country we have been affected by COVID, we've seen what's been happening around the world, and we haven't had the same impact as many other places, but we have been separated. We've had to be very careful of our elders and ensure that we haven't taken anything to them that would put their lives at risk, which is difficult because we take our instructions directly from our elders. So we've had to be very careful. Our course, the meeting together, which happens twice per subject, so should have happened 4 times this year, has only happened once. And so that's been a huge impact. upon our students as well. Are about to do a makeup and run a residential that starts this Friday, but our students who are living interstate can't come because our borders are all still closed in the various states. So the virus has heavily impacted upon the course, upon the way that we get together, the way that we learn from each other, we support each other through that learning journey. You will remember I said we have elders who come into this course who've never been to school, but they do complete a course at university standard, and that's because of the way everyone looks after each other and the recognition that while some of us might have formal education, other people come with cultural knowledge that we don't necessarily have. So we look after each other. So it has really heavily impacted, and it has impacted upon students and elders and community members' mental health as well. And given that we have ongoing trauma from colonisation that has impacted heavily on our communities, people are a lot more vulnerable to being unwell at this time and not having that support to carry them through. So we're very lucky that we do have each other, but this time has made it quite a difficult time for our community. So I'll just say thank you for now, and I'll talk a bit more later. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue. Wow, just a lot of knowledge, and I just want to also just take the chance to recognize those painful struggles, the generations. And I think it was very beautiful. You said 3 generations of you coming back to the country, coming back to the land. So I just thank you for sharing so much of your story with us, Ray and Sue. So I'd like to move to Nadia now. We'd love to hear more about your work and how you guys are kind of coming together as well at this time.
So first of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for the organizers of the panel and for everyone with whom I've been in discussion last week. Your insights have been extremely valuable, and they've given ideas for us how to further our work in the future. So I'm an MA student at the Central European University. I'm studying international public affairs, and actually last year, before starting this journey with an MA studies, I attended the Romani Studies program. It is a unique program which addresses the Roma community, and it involves around 15 students from different countries who are of Roma origin, and who come together in Budapest while CU was at Budapest to study about their own heritage, culture, and also policy and other ways that we can support our community. As you probably know, CU has been forcefully evicted from Budapest. So right now I'm in Vienna. And CU has been a beacon of light for not just Roma communities, but overall many of the communities in Central and Southeastern Europe, which is struggling with a rise of extreme right. Having a program like a Romani Studies program at CU is extremely valuable for our community, because every year we get to learn more about ourselves, create knowledge on Roma by Roma, and thus we give power to Roma and voices to Roma to actually tell their stories and write their stories and participate in academia as knowledge creators. As the emergency state happened, and as COVID rose, our community was severely struck by it in different ways. One of them was definitely the securitization of the Romani community, different narratives about Roma which are based on prejudice. And as a response to these events, the Roma students at the CU actually started a Romani Students Association, through which we actually started to challenge the narratives which were served by the public, to challenge them through social media in particular. So yeah, I mean, the securitization process is an extremely interesting thing to observe during the coronavirus situation, because, for example, in Slovakia, we had a full lockdown of the Romani community. Roma settlements were closed down. They could not have free movement, and there were policies addressing only Roma communities, which shows that also not just the lockdown, but the military was involved in this process, which is another layer of this violent response of the state, which aims extremely, it aims only at Roma. And also we witnessed a rise of police brutality along with that, which keeps on happening. In the recent days, we witnessed that in Macedonia as well. And also the internet access of young Roma has been very low. So the online education did not work as well for Roma as it did for other communities. That's why we started our association, in order to challenge the narratives and contribute in our modest way as much as we could. And we started promoting the stories of Roma who are doctors, Roma who are working in laboratories, Roma who are actually working with the Red Cross, and showing that Roma are actually a significant part, a contributor to our societies in this crisis. Not just, and definitely not, the ones who are causing the virus, as some of the governments, like it was the case in Slovakia, were saying.
Again, thank you so much, Nadia. You know, I think you've touched on a lot and that we're not seeing over here in the news regarding what's happening with your community. So I just really encourage people to, you know, keep an eye on that, all of our audience, and do what we can to be in solidarity with you all. Thank you for sharing. And so now I'll move over to Patricio, or I believe Pato. And so he's going to share a little bit about his work.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the invitation too. My name is Patricio Baloy. I am a lecturer at the Institute of Economics at Austral University in Chile. And I am now based in Boston in this moment, completing my PhD at UMass Boston. And I would like to tell the story of the engagement of our university with with some community groups, particularly indigenous groups, but through our students, who are the ones doing most of the job right now. Austral University, it's a university located in what would be northern Patagonia. It's a small center, and it serves mostly rural and indigenous communities. First generation students are a big proportion of our students. And yeah, the pandemic hit really hard in there, not only because the lockdown and people couldn't access their daily jobs, but also because of the historic injustices, that are being exacerbated by this. In the case of Chile, indigenous communities have been displaced from their traditional lands, and not only in their lands, but also their occupations. So since their traditional occupations then are not valuable for the current economic structure, that means that they mostly migrated to the services industry, which was the most impacted by the pandemic. So you have a double or triple impact there that these communities are suffering. In our university, we have an organization called the Center for Entrepreneurial Learning, CEM, which worked with the Talwars Network for over 4 years to enhance an incubation process and help students start their own projects to help the communities during their time at the university. Some of those students are from the city of Payaco. It's nearby Valdivia, And these students went through a couple of methodologies in which they wanted to develop a project which can impact themselves and their communities also through entrepreneurship. Actually, some of the methodologies of those projects was the dragon dreaming, which comes from Australia, and also the fundamental human needs methodology that we use. So these students for the project organized a network of youth organizations in Payaco. And they're helping the community, especially during this time, with three main actions. The first one, soup kitchens, because there was really a problem of access to food by a big part of the community. The second is food sovereignty, helping people recreate and revive those traditional means they had for growing food. So it is becoming again a way, right, to cope with, not only to cope with this, but also to exercise your ancestral memory of how to grow your own food. And the last one that fortunately it's being a bit phased out now is clothes for winter, because winter is just finishing there. And that was really helpful. They didn't do that by themselves. They did that with the help of local shops, but particularly with the help of a group of indigenous communities in Payaco who provided them with something called the community ruca. A ruca is a traditional house of the Mapuche. And today, although most people do not live in those houses, they do gather there. They do get together as a community. And you know, it is interesting that they have no problem sharing this and providing this to support the whole community, while you have a number of other infrastructure that could have been used for that. But they were, I would say, proactive on saying we want to be part of this, right? So our students started working with these indigenous communities, and from there, they coordinated the help that was needed in all that area. Something interesting too is that they, and probably it's not very good for their aims of getting more support from other places, but they do not disseminate or take photographs of the people they are helping. And this is something that, yeah, it's a matter of discussion. We can talk about it if you want, but at least in the world I live in, right, in institutionalized in academia and other places, not having evidence of what you are doing is quite complicated if you really want to get more support. Students have been coping with the new online classes, but they have also been more impacted by this, because indigenous communities do not have the access that other students, for example, in urban areas might have. So it'll be great if we can hear about your experience with this, but we've been trying, right, to reach out to them as much as possible, but it's not an easy task so far. It is surprising to us, right, how they were able to organize so fast and continue the work they were doing inside the university, inside the Center for Entrepreneurial Learning, right, in their own districts, in their own lands, and completely independent, without that much support. I have to say it, with the university, it's a bit shut down. Professors and lecturers are coping with this new online world. It's not possible for them to leave the city and go to those areas. So students are doing their job mostly on their own. And well, the last experience I want to convey is some groups working in community-based tourism, which has been also heavily impacted by the pandemic, which was an alternative for the indigenous communities, particularly in the Andes, and supported by the university to organize and also challenge a bit the traditional way of resort tourism that was abundant in that area. And well, they are coping with it through different strategies, including online fairs, meaning that you can still buy the products they make, or they can still get together in the same setting, but online. We need to see how that works, but so far we are happy that our students continue to be active and helping their communities despite the pandemic. Thank you.
No, kakinalin, Pato. Thank you so much, Pato. Yeah, I'm just kind of reflecting right now, taking some notes, kind of just thinking about how all these things are telling, you know, different parts of the same story. We're getting a lot of questions, so I'm really excited to review some of those. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to kind of touch on like my positionality as a graduate student right now, as a youth who is, you know, in this pandemic, as an Indigenous person in this pandemic, and really like my gift as a language person. I really want to acknowledge and thank Uncle Ray for Uncle Ray. Lorleen and I stayed on for like 20 minutes the other day, and we kept talking, and it really helped me put a lot of things together as a language person. So it's been a really special couple days being part of this webinar with you all. And I think, you know, that is kind of my role right now. We're seeing a lot of the overwhelmingness of tech life right now, and a lot of us are tired, and a lot of us are taking on more roles than we're used to as well. And that's great. We're picking up where we can. But I think for me, it's important to realize, like, as a linguistic student right now, I'm in my 3rd year of graduate school, and doing the language, whatever that means. I mean, it changes all the time, but like as a student or as a co-creator in knowledge production in my community, creating pedagogical materials for my community, you know, so I have a lot of different roles, but it's important to remember, like, I can help folks with food sovereignty because we're doing those projects too, especially as coastal ocean people. We're really reviving a lot of our relationship with the ocean as well as our food. You know, and Pato, you also got me thinking about Indigenous economies. Uncle Ray was touching on nation building. I know for Nadia as well, I think aspects of recreating social systems, economic systems, knowledge systems, these things that have been taken from us as Indigenous peoples. So when we do this work, it's more than just, you know, your entry as like a language teacher or like a historian. As Indigenous peoples, we have a lot of skills. And I think that speaks to, for us, our traditional culture. Folks had a lot more roles, you know. You didn't just get to sit by and like just be the person that collected acorns. You know, we all helped together. And from what I'm seeing right now, I do see the youth using social media and the internet, you know, so when Nadia mentioned either instability to access or device access, you know, the internet like is really making a difference for people right now. And so what I'm seeing in Indigenous communities, folks are doing a lot of mutual aid. They're creating to care for houseless folks, to check on elders. And so I think, you know, that might not look like university work, but it's community care. And it's, you know, we have to have both of those things. So yeah, I'm really interested in a lot of the things we talked about today. I myself, I'm in a program at Tulane University. It's the Mellon Fellowship for Community Engaged Scholarship. And so in that role, I've been working on a coloring book, as well as other literary materials for our language. So we don't have any kind of fun and exciting things that people can work with. And we're really kind of still coming out of and doing our revitalization. So, you know, we look to other folks like the Kanaka Maoli, like the Maori, like the Aboriginal Australian folks, because it's like, you guys have been doing this, you know, the revitalization stuff longer. So there's kind of this larger conversation in linguistics around that. And I think this webinar is also unique because I was kind of reflecting, you know, they're kind of, let's see, we're kind of the idea being, you know, where we're at right now. And it's like, we're not even through this pandemic. You know, I think that when we talk about what can universities do or what are they doing, that time is now. So I was excited to hear that folks, you know, have stories, but it's also like, I think some of those things are, you know, we need to find those places that we can support projects. So I want to kind of touch on some of these questions. And I think if somebody wants to wave me down, if they feel particularly passionate about a question. So Sue, this is directed to you, so I'm going to go to you. Sue mentioned the difficulties about not being able to meet in person for certain cultural events. Despite potentially limited access to tech, have you found alternatives to fill that void?
Well, we've used a variety of methods which do involve technology. So, yeah, we've been emailing students, we've been sending out announcements over the university system. We've been phoning students just so that people can talk to students. The younger students have set up Facebook pages and groups to communicate with each other. But what we find is while that works well for the younger students, the older students it doesn't. And it has been more myself and the staff of the program actually just taking time to ring people and talk to them. So yeah, we're very limited in what we can do when we can't get together face to face.
Does anyone else feel interested in touching on that as well? I think you guys already kind of talked about it. I have another question here that, you know, I wanted to kind of point out on the language program you guys have, Sue, that, or your culture program, when you said that the students actually have to present to the elders, you know, and I do think about that. How do we as Native people create those protocols in our programs? Like, I'm going to do that with my community, but I'm not required to. And, you know, so there's a question here, makes me think of that. Somebody said, how have the partnerships with universities been developed in a way not to center the university and create and recreate problematic relationships, but instead center community knowledge? And I think about what Pato said about the pictures as well. You know, when things get kind of, you know, we're pushing these programs through right now, there's this great excitement, like you're saying, that they're going out, they're doing stuff. And I think that is when people's rights and comfortability starts to kind of slip. And it's like, no, it's important for us to maintain respect with our community partners. And I think stuff like that, where it's like, how do we also make sure we're reinforcing protocols as we move forward? And so I just love that about your program. And I'm wondering if anyone else can think of or want to comment on that. How do we not recreate problematic relationships?
Yeah, I'll have something to say. Look, we have, that was one of the fears that we had with, one of the fears that elders had with the courses, you know, that some might just go out on their own and take things into their own hands, and how they deal with our culture and the way they deal with it. But we got a word, as I spoke to you about the other night, called Yamata, and it's a holistic way of living, and those values are taught to us as young ones, and that's about that respect and you know, to be honest and courtesy and all these things, and they're all rolled into. And one of the main things is to go slow and you know, to take things in and to understand, you know, your part in the holistic thing. So what we, as kids grow, as little ones growing up, we're taught that by our mothers and our grandmothers, and that's a part of our culture, is understanding that your place, and you know, and that's the elders are the ones that we go to all the time, you know, for guidance, because they're the knowledge holders. We understand that they're the knowledge holders. So it's making sure that people, you know, are always reminded about that word, and brings them back to sort of to reality a bit, and to understand that, you know, are they living by it? And I say to, you know, young ones that I'm teaching at times, you know, that's a good thing to look at in life, is every day, if when you're doing things, remind yourself of that word, and are you living by that word? And that's the way we try to, you know, put across it with our culture anyway, is, you know, make sure you live by Yamata.
And also the relationship with the university isn't always smooth. As passage of time goes on, people tend to forget about how we started this relationship. And, you know, as people get replaced higher up the ladder, they forget that this isn't a university-owned course, and we're very fortunate in that our elders are very strong, and they remind the university when they need to remind the university. And one of the things that they teach us, both through their words and their actions, is that we are sovereign people, and we don't need to ask permission to be recognised as sovereign people. We're sovereign, and that's our right. And this course is our course. It's our language, it's our culture, and this is our country. So these people are living in our country, and they may live there as allies with us, but they have to respect our rights as sovereign people. And our elders are very strong in ensuring that people are reminded of that. They do it gently, and if it's not heard, they will be a bit more forceful with it when they need to be.
Yeah, and I think too that I see that also for those of us who are in academia too. It's like we are the ones that have to kind of push back, right, in our departments and stuff. So in the US, we don't really have, gosh, the state of Native studies in the US is just abysmal. We have, you know, a lot of people working hard on it, but it's just there's so much work to do to get to where we have more autonomy and sovereignty. So I just really shout out all the Indigenous academics out there, because it's definitely, it's a hard place to be. And I do think that you guys establishing that program and creating visibility within the university, it really just shows how much that's needed. Because if there is no department, if there's no way to get this education, and there's no visibility, not even a Native Studies department, you know, how can we expect people to follow that and want to be part of that? So it takes really building. And I have another question here that's kind of related. I identify with it. It says, you know, and I kind of struggle with this idea, decolonize. I kind of like coming more from the Indigenous perspective to say indigenize. Something about that, just shifting the focus away from, like, it is really tiring to constantly address colonialism. How can we, like, bring our energy back in to, like, say, okay, we're coming from indigenizing, like, we're worldview. So the question, how can students understand how to decolonize curriculum and their own learning? And so for me, just like I just said, every course I've been in, I've always just been the one asking, like, well, where are Native people in this? And so it's become, you know, pretty much reflex now, but I'm wondering what other people want to touch on about that. Yeah, Nadia, how can students decolonize or or just kind of create a more just space for themselves?
Yeah, we have to first realize that academia is extremely a competitive space. It can be lonely, it can be hierarchical and isolating. And when you come as a member of a minority, as it was in my case, you are already coming with a certain burden on your shoulders. And you are the only Roma, for example, in a room of 30 people who are mostly from Europe. And they do not know much about Roma, and what they do know is very limited. So in a way, what me and all of my other colleagues from the Romani Students Association are doing is that we make sure that while we are in class, that we also raise the questions like, okay, if we are today discussing the nation state, how does that refer to Roma? Because we as Roma do not have a state. And we try to challenge the dominant ideas that we have about society and how it is organized from our perspectives and from our experiences. And that is extremely important because maybe the people who are in that room, they do not necessarily have a bad intention. They just didn't have the opportunity to learn more. And having a Roma like CU does, making sure that there are Roma in rooms, it is an extremely important thing. When a Romani voice is heard, then we can actually change a curriculum. But if we don't have a Roma in the rooms, in schools, then we don't have anyone who can challenge it in the right way.
Yeah, I would also like to add on what you were commenting before, Maura, and what Nadia said, in that I think the university institutionally should address the issue of devolution a bit better, instead, right, of trying to really get in between and try to mediate, right, this relationship of indigenous communities, right, with other authorities. It's provide the space, serve communities according to their needs, and do not actually push for things that maybe universities shouldn't do. You have, for example, right, problems that are happening now with the pandemic, access to internet. I think that's something the university can help with, for example, because you're also providing the course, helping first generation students. But we also have the problem of intergenerational living between indigenous communities. And I'm not sure the university can do that much apart from research supporting how to address that challenge. That's more of a public policy thing. If the concept of devolution, I think, gets more embedded institutionally in universities, we can see this different relationship, that it's not colonial, right? That it's not about, we are here writing and without us you cannot do this. I don't think that's true in our experience. It's not. So yeah, it'll be great if we can have a new deal, I think, with the indigenous communities, understanding that the success of universities is also part of the success of the colonial experience. So it's time to give back.
I'd like to follow on from that, because I think, I'd like to shift that question from focus on students being responsible for this to the universities themselves being responsible, because universities have been the places where knowledge, and I use that word very loosely, have been built about who and what Indigenous people and Indigenous nations are. And it's time universities took the responsibility to correct that narrative that they've built up, and for them to let go of the power that they hold over our lives. And I think this pandemic that we're all facing provides an excellent opportunity to start changing that narrative, because the fact of where we are now at this point of time in history is because of things like the Industrial Revolution and capitalism and the greed worldwide, the ripping apart of the environment. So the pandemic isn't something that just happened out of anywhere. And if people really want to address the crises that we're facing across the globe, the pandemics, the wildfires we're having, the weather, we're having climate change, well then those people who are the experts and the researchers actually need to turn their ears on and open their eyes and open their heart and really, really learn about how to look after this planet. And those of us who hold that are the Indigenous people of this world. We know the answers to these questions, and universities are the places that need to start the process of changing the narrative that they've actually built.
Thank you so much. Are we going 4 more minutes? Are we almost out of time? 2 minutes? Yeah, I just wanted to really kind of be in that space that Sue just created. And what I see really is the university really, you know, being that protective space for these really important voices, which have been minoritized. I'm not sure what we want to call them. Indigenous voices, minority voices, just in this space where people can safely and freely share ideas, you know, really what a knowledge center is, but also recognizing the moment to use the power, like Sue said, that they've accumulated to give people who have been made powerless more power. And really the only way we can really get through this is by helping each other, lifting each other up. So I'm just, again, very grateful to have been able to connect with you all. I'm excited to be part of more spaces like this. And I'll hand it over back to Laurleen, and thank you for all our organizers and our tech people that helped out as well.
Thank you all so much. Maura, Ray, Sue, Pato, Naja, Lauren, Erin, others. But for the panelists in particular, I just want to say how much we appreciate your experience and your wisdom and your generosity. We've just really begun this conversation, and I very much look forward to staying in touch and I hope continuing to work together to build a global movement of civically engaged universities, you know, universities that really re-examine their histories and their relationships with society and with people and with the earth, and really begin to change in some of the ways that we've just started to touch upon. So this discussion's been recorded, as you know, and we'll share it throughout our networks. I'll just make a quick announcement that the next webinar is on November 9th, and we'll be looking at civically engaged universities in relationship to communities and social entrepreneurship. And I'll also mention that we are continuing to accept applications for the mini grants for graduate students, and I know we have at least a couple of graduate students here who are eligible to apply for those, and I hope that others around the world will apply. Again, thank you all so much. Let us stay in touch. Please take care of yourselves and be safe.